Let's watch a cartoon for this time of the season. If you choose to like and subscribe, perhaps this rhyme is the reason.
More like Dr. Sus.
Welcome to Hester Bros Cartoon Theater. I'm Alec, this is my brother Lucas, and it's Christmas month in Hester Bros Cartoon Theater. We are talking about one of the all-time holiday classics, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Today, we will be inducting How the Grinch Stole Christmas into the JBCT Toon Museum, our catalog of historic cartoons. Before we get into the history and what makes this cartoon museum-worthy in our eyes, would you be able to just tell me about your memory and experience with this one growing up?
This is probably my favorite nostalgic one that I have. I don't even remember the first time I watched it because we were probably both very young. It's just a classic. It's one of the ones I've seen a million times and watch it every year. And I'd say it's my favorite, 100%.
I think it might be my favorite too, nostalgically speaking. Mom and Dad visited me in Florida and they sat down in our apartment and were like, what Christmas special should we watch? And everybody said The Grinch.
Yeah.
That always felt like the first one that we decided to watch every holiday season, or the one that we as a family were always the most excited about.
And one thing that's kind of different about this one than all the other ones we watched that when we were kids was this one's still actually good. And the other ones aren't really actually good anymore. All of the Rankin Bass ones, I watched Frosty the Snowman last night. I watched The Polar Express last night. I've watched recently Rudolph and Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and none of those are that great. But even then, it's pretty. There's problems. There's lots of noticeable problems. But this one is actually a near perfect Christmas special.
I want to make sure that I interject that Polar Express is maybe my favorite Christmas movie. With that lead-in, what I kind of want to be thinking about today as we induct this cartoon is not only what makes it great, but what are the nostalgic things that make it a thing that everybody wants to watch every year, what makes a good Christmas special, and what makes this a great Christmas special specifically. There's a lot of interesting history around The Grinch, and if you're watching, I'd be surprised if you weren't aware that this is a cartoon special based on the 1957 children's book by the legendary Dr. Seuss. There's a grumpy creature called the Grinch. He lives on the outskirts of the joyful Whoville and attempts to stop Christmas from coming by stealing all the decorations, food, and presents from the town. How the Grinch Stole Christmas was released almost 10 years after the book in 1966 and has remained a tradition for families across the globe to watch every holiday season. People know that Dr. Seuss wrote the original story. You may not know that his real name is Ted Geisel, and he himself was the co-director, co-producer, and the writer of the screenplay for the cartoon as well. The dialogue is pretty much the same as the book. I read the book recently, but the big difference is in the songs, which he also did the lyrics for.
You have all the tender sweetness of a seasick crocodile, Mr. Grinch.
And it's a kind of a fun note. In the intro, it shows co-produced by Tim Weissel, but then it says lyrics by Dr. Seuss. So he differentiated his own name, and that was an intentional creative choice. Dr. Seuss had denied requests to turn his books into television series in the past because he believed that most television producers wanted to, and I quote, bat them out fast and use up my whole life's work in a year.
Flashes all of the new movies that have been Dr. Seuss across the screen.
This one manifested because he got a pitch from the right person. The co-director and co-producer of How the Grinch Stole Christmas was none other than the legendary Warner Brothers animator Chuck Jones, known especially for his work on the Looney Tunes. You and I love him for the Phantom Toll Booth, among many other things.
He's one of my favorite animators of all time, actually.
Yeah, totally agreed. And you get his vibe as you watch this special, 100%.
Absolutely.
Jones and Dr. Seuss had worked together before, because around World War II, they actually did a series of short training films for the military, which was pretty common for animation studios of the time to be doing. They featured adventures of a character called Private Snafu, and actually instructed the military on certain things that they should be doing via Dr. Seuss rhyme-filled cartoon.
I'd just like to say there is a point in history where Dr. Seuss was telling rhymes to explain the military how to fight bloody wars.
Flash forward to 1962. Chuck Jones was just let go from the Warner Brothers after 30 years of his amazing contribution. He was hired to be in charge of the brand new MGM Animation Visual Arts Studio, after MGM's previous cartoon studio had closed in 1957. And 2 years after being hired into this role, he wrote to Dr. Seuss, "Maybe you don't think I can draw your character." And with that message attached a drawing of the Cat in the Hat. That didn't work right away. It still required many in-person meetings for him to actually convince him in the long run that this was a partnership worth doing. His condition was that he wanted to make sure that he remained the co-producer if they were going to do a special. And at this time, they had not decided that The Grinch was the one, just that they were going to do one of his books in general. But the timeline worked out where it would be released around the Christmas season, and they said, let's do The Grinch. Jones and Dr. Seuss would go on to collaborate on more Seuss cartoons, including Horton Hears a Who and 1971's The Cat in the Hat. So Lucas, we rewatched this for this episode, right?
We did. I did.
I had already watched it once this year, and I watch it every year. But this is the first time that I'd actually gone in and tried to approach it with a critical eye to understand why I love it so much. Did you have a similar experience?
Kind of. I do that a lot subconsciously because I've been blind by the academia culture that I've been raised in. In general, I did notice a lot more things being really mindful. I actually took more notes on this than I've taken on maybe anything else we've covered. And that's partially just because there's so many good things that they do right. Yep. Literally the title sequence. It's kind of simple, but the combination of the music and the snowflakes and the color of the blue behind the text. You're in Christmas now, bitch, and it's not stopping. It is not slowing down. Even the scenes of the Grinch on his mountain, you know, everything about it is just so textured for Christmas. The colors, the music, the voice acting, it's just like they hit everything right. Kind of unbelievable how well done it is.
There's something different about making a Christmas special or show or movie that is different than making something else, where I feel like the way that we think about what makes it good or bad is entirely different. Do you want to speak on that a little bit?
Well, it's because there's kind of a different intention, you know, and there's a different background that you're bringing to it. If you make a new movie or a new show, you need to introduce people to a feeling or to a character or to a concept, and you need to teach them very quickly through, you know, visual storytelling what they're supposed to be invested in, or, you know, clue them into what parts of the story that are the most intriguing or characters that are intriguing. And with a Christmas thing, what you need to do is try to hit notes on something that exists already. And it's kind of a mixture of showing somebody something new that's creative and fun and whimsical while also playing to the nostalgic, traditional sense of Christmas that I think is even different now than it was in 1966.
That's my thought as well. Creating something for Christmas, you are doing it to evoke a feeling in people, something that's interesting that I can think about on my behalf. I never rewatch anything except Christmas things. And every year, my favorites, I reliably watch them because 'tis the season. There is something different about that, trying to create something that is rewatchable and pleasant. And I also think that people enjoy Christmas things for different reasons. One movie that was extremely popular with my workplace was National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
Oh, I hate that movie.
I think that is a movie that shows like a bunch of awkward family drama, which weirdly does connect a lot of people to the holidays. It's almost heartwarming in a way. It's like, oh yeah, my family was kind of dysfunctional like this. But for me, like the stuff that I felt like at least we were raised on was the really joyful side of the Christmas thing. It's not very cynical. And I tend to not like Christmas things that are more cynical. I just can't put myself in the zone. And that's because I sort of have an expectation that I've created with what I want out of a Christmas special. How the Grinch Stole Christmas, I think, does something interesting where it sort of does hit that grumpiness side and maybe a little bit of the mean-spiritedness, but then it has an ending that really brings us back to what is nostalgic and joyful about the holiday season.
So when we think about what makes a special and what makes a good show, my issue is with Christmas specials in general is a lot are good at being specials, but not good at actually being good shows. I'm looking at you, Rankin Bass. I'm looking at you, Rudolph.
Stop calling me names!
You should be ashamed of yourself.
It hits the emotional notes well. You know, it does the music, it does the scenery, it does the Christmas moral. But the thing is, like, the animation's kind of weird, the voice acting's kind of weird, the lines don't really make sense, the world doesn't really make sense. And I would say that that's the case with most Christmas special type things that I've ever seen. But what the Grinch does is instead of trying to mix the real world with this fantastical world and it coming out clunky because it really doesn't make sense unless you really suspend your disbelief, what we have is Whoville. And Whoville is immediately, you have this mountain, you have this town, you have all these weird toys, you have people that don't look exactly like humans, you know? It's familiar because it's close enough to human Christmas that we identify with it and it still hits those notes. But it's fantastical enough that we're lost in the fantasy of it and we're lost in the creativeness. When you watch the Polar Express, it's pretty easy. Sorry to keep poking the Polar Express.
You're killing me. Okay.
I just watched it last night. It's fresh in my head. It's so easy to look at this and be like, why in the world do a million of these things happen? This wouldn't make sense. You know, when you watch Rankin Bass, there's a million things where you're like, this just doesn't look good. This just doesn't sound good. This really doesn't make any sense. Even though there probably are things like that in The Grinch, you suspend your disbelief a lot more. And part of it is because one thing I'd say about the animation and Chuck Jones, remember the scene where
the Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea.
The slow change of the wrinkles in his face and his hair curling. There is so much motion and feeling and gravity in that whole thing, and it like works in this like twisting motion with the music. The narrator themselves has a great voice and is like the perfect, literally perfect narrator you could ask for something like this.
Popguns, pampooners, pantookas and drums, checkerboards, bisselbinks, popcorn and plum.
There's so much character and feeling and emotion in it, and I don't get that from other things.
You mentioned the Chuck Jones influence. That partnership with Dr. Seuss, you really get that combination of the animation and the brilliance in writing. The book itself is very short, so they did a ton with animation in this special in order to elongate it and make it long enough to be like a 30-minute or 24-minute segment.
And yet it doesn't feel drawn out.
Exactly.
There's the Halloween Grinch special that we reviewed recently. And I love that one too, but you can tell that it doesn't hit the same notes. And one reason is because they kind of do the same thing, but you could tell it's a lot more filler based. And it's because the things that they're doing aren't as interesting leading up to the climax. And here, the whole sequence of the Grinch stealing stuff, and you get the song, "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch," it's f***ing iconic, and it's iconic for a reason. This voice, Thurl Ravenscroft, delivers the perfect tone for this, dude. This deep, gritty voice talking about all the nasty things about the Grinch.
You have termites in your smile.
And he's snaking around the tree and stealing stuff, and he's like standing on this bent ladder. All of the colors are so striking. All of the scenes are so visually interesting. When he's on top of this like weird wonky ladder to pull the star off the tree, he could have just made a straight fire truck ladder, but he didn't. He made it this crazy, bizarre, bent up shape. It creates something that you're just so sucked into, like what all of these things that you're watching and the words and the world and the weird things that he's interacting with. Nothing looks totally normal, and it makes the whole thing visually interesting from beginning to end. And it's hard to do that with Christmas stuff because so much of it is just a Christmas tree, snow. You're just hitting the bullet points. But to give it that feeling, you need to create this sense of wonder that exists outside of that. And it's like, good. It's good. It's good.
Yeah,
it's a good thing.
And the mechanisms of which the Grinch steals all these things, like the candy canes and the wreaths and these wind-up toys, every one is animated to tell a different story and do that in a completely unique way that was not seen previously within the context of that segment. Can we talk about the narrator for a second? Boris Karloff does such a tremendous job, and he is the perfect person to do it. You may know him from being an iconic horror movie legend also. It just feels like this creation, this entire How the Grinch Stole Christmas special is a culmination of so many wonderful things.
Now, I would be amiss, since we did look at it critically, there are a few things that I do want to mention. I would say are nitpicks, and if I was watching it for enjoyment, I wouldn't have even noticed them, but because I was watching it with a critical eye, I kind of have to point out a couple things. The Dahu Flores song at the end is kind of silly.
Welcome Christmas,
And the fact that the Jim Carrey Grinch makes a joke about it at the end of that movie actually is hilarious.
Chuck Jones coined this phrase as Susie in Latin.
That's silly.
It was a very intentional choice to try to have this nonsense thing and not be associated with any specific religious sect. It was intended to be non-secular, this world that he created.
That's nice. I like that. The one scene where the Grinch looks over like Cindy Lou Who's bed with all the kids in it. Stranger danger. Don't go. Stranger danger, everyone. Very, very unsafe. Animal abuse, pretty flagrant. Figured it's worth mentioning too. Can you imagine your little Oppie like carrying this giant sled filled with toys? It is an Oppie-sized dog, dude. It is a small dog. That's pretty much everything that I thought that was silly, and for what it's worth, those are 3 pretty small points. Animal abuse is important. We should not abuse animals, everybody. What I love about this, and what really drives it home, is how they finish. The tension of how the Grinch rises to the top of this mountain with the toys is so great. You know, you see the background colors change. He has this whole coming of age realization, and the sled's about to fall off the thing. The background just goes strikingly bright red, and the music intensifies, and it matches the animation so perfectly. And you actually feel a sense of like heart beating when you get to this part. That is amazing, and it hits home with a Christmas moral that actually works. And that is my biggest problem with Christmas in general, is just the fact that the morals usually don't actually make sense with how the characters behave. And this gives you the actual, like, all the presents are gone. Materialism is out of the factor. And it still happens. They still have this lovely ceremony, and it shows that these people, and again, it's important that it's not humanity, because if this happened with the human world, nobody would believe it. They'd be like, no, dude, everybody would be pissed. They'd call the police. They'd be so mad. Kids would be crying. But in Whoville, these people are better than us. So it works, and it drives home a moral of this is how we should behave. You don't get that in any other Christmas special because it's too close to home. The fact that this happens and the Grinch sees it and it changes his mind and makes him realize the special thing, nothing does it that well. You know, Christmas is such a hypocritical holiday. And the fact that this is able to go in the right way and not feel cheesy at all, like actually feel heartwarming and like it's hitting a moral in a way that makes sense. It's so difficult, actually, and it does it perfectly with the tension. And then the falling action, he literally falls to the town and gives all the toys back, and they have their whole feast and everything. It's good job. Good job, Dr. Seuss.
Good job to you for that explanation. I wrote down something very vague about that, but I could not have said it better, so I'm not even going to try to expand. The point about Whoville being a fantasy world and have it not need to have realism, I think is a very important one, though. I'm thinking about the live-action Grinch that a lot of people probably know. Some, maybe if you're young, maybe more than the cartoon, right? I don't love it. But I understand why it is the way that it is, because it is more realistic. The thing that I don't like is that in the original, the Who's are just a beautiful, like, heartwarming people. In the live-action version, they're all terrible. They're all materialistic.
So
Boy, nothing beats Christmas, right?
You're right.
But when you're going to make it live-action like this, we see humans. So it's hard to just have them all be nice and be able to accept that and not feel like there's something phony about it.
And that Grinch is doing a different thing. That Grinch specifically kind of actually doesn't like Christmas because of its materialism. A little bit more on the nose. Like, you could argue that this Grinch kind of feels the same way, but he's also just kind of grumpy and doesn't like the noise and is annoyed with their joy, and it's like, where does this joy come from, you senseless? I like the Jim Carrey Grinch. It's mostly because I like Jim Carrey, but it doesn't hold a candle to the original. Not even close. No rendition does.
There's another Grinch reboot, the 2018 animated movie, which I just watched like yesterday. That one is probably how I would make a Grinch reboot more so if I did it, but...
See, I thought that one was just boring.
Oh, you saw it?
Yeah, I thought it was just boring.
Oh, the problem with it is that even though I felt like it was the right creative angle, I don't necessarily think it was necessary. And it didn't add anything to the original either, right?
Nostalgia Critic is one of my big influences for YouTube. And he reviewed that movie and he was like, you know what you could have done? You could have maybe cut it about half the runtime, maybe a little bit over that. And then, I don't know, make it a more accessible animation style so that you don't have as much clunky CGI. Oh, and I don't know, change the music and have it written by Dr. Seuss. I don't know, maybe like the original! Why do you try to touch something that's already perfect? You're not gonna do anything better with it. It can't happen. Remake stuff that wasn't that good. That's how you can make a good remake. Don't touch stuff that literally is so freaking good and beloved. Touch the things that people don't love that much. God.
And that's so interesting, though, because I do agree with you that if a reboot is worth making, it's probably because you could maybe make something beloved, but it would have to be something that everybody kind of agrees now was kind of a piece of crap, but people liked it anyway, and now make it good. The problem is, do people care to watch it if it wasn't beloved in the first place? There's a little bit of a quagmire there with if a reboot is actually worth doing or not. Jeez, there's so much good content in this episode.
Really
How are we going to cut it? Okay.
I'm gonna be so busy.
I know. I'm really proud of this one, though.
Yeah, me too. Everybody like and subscribe. We worked really hard, especially me.
Definitely, because Lucas has to put this edit together. And seriously, thank you all so much for hanging out this long. Follow us on social media. Next week, we will be celebrating a subscriber milestone with the best Christmas cartoons that you should add to your collection that you might not know about, but I will simplify the title.
Yeah, we hit 1,613 subscribers like we promised we would do a video for. I'm regretting that so hard because those videos are so long and it's gonna be so much work, dude. I'm gonna have the busiest Christmas of my life. I'm gonna be working my ass off like the little sweatshop elves in Santa's workshop.
You should listen to Elf's Lament by the Bare Naked Ladies. You'll relate.
Okay.
All right. Bye, everybody. We love you all.
I love at least half of you, maybe.